That's good.
Good evening. Well, I recently started a blog. I wanted to talk about my work as a PhD student in atmospheric science. But the very first blog I posted was actually called Climate Steaks: Why Scientists Should Be More Like Local Butchers. And why would I want to be like a local butcher? Especially as I am studying climate, and you know about the greenhouse gases. And I'm a vegetarian. Well, I remember when I was small in Mexico, and I would go with my mom to the local market, and there to our local butcher. Usually my mom would be there to buy liver and chicken hearts and all these weird organs to feed me. She kept saying it was against anemia. But the butcher was there to help us, to give us advice, recommendations, a recipe or two. He knew his meat, and we trusted him. But not only because he's an expert at what he does, but because we built a relationship with him. And this is the role that I see the modern scientists to have. Why? Well, if you want quality food, you go to your local market. But what about the information that you're consuming? What is the quality? And what is the source of that information? Well, here's where scientists can come in. And we are lucky in that society already places a high level of trust on the scientific profession. So we just have to work a little bit on that bilateral relationship. So why should we bother? Why is this important? Well, I'm sure most of you have come across a headline like this at some point. We're inundated with sensationalized headlines where the aim is to sell news rather than simply inform us. So if science also it's quite often the topic of the news, but it is often taken out of context, or it is misused, or at best, the story is too simplified. So as consumers of that information, you have to be critical, but you also have to have a reliable source to that information. So for that, scientists, we have to step out and we have to step it up. So let's take some very frequent keywords that you hear when you talk about the climate news. Greenland, polar bears, sea level rise. And let's just go a little bit beyond that, just a look behind those words. I was very lucky that I could go to Greenland last summer. It was part of a course to see how climate change is affecting Arctic societies. And when we landed there, we saw this beautiful, rocky landscape. It's something I have never seen before. There are no trees in Greenland. There are no roads connecting one town from another. So if you want to travel, you have to go by air, by water, or by ice. The biggest lesson I got from that course was actually what I learned after talking to the local Greenlanders. And after I got just a little bit of a glimpse to see Greenland from their perspective. So we had coffee with a labor union representative, Julie, and she said it beautifully. She said, "To us Greenlanders, ice is like a huge highway." But what happens when that highway is melting? Well, just like for polar bears, the Greenlandic Inuit, which make up at least 80% of the population, depend on that ice to move around for hunting. So no ice means that they can't have access to territories, or they can't follow their animals that they're hunting. The same for fishing. Thinner ice means they can't go out and fish. It's endangering their livelihood, their traditions, and their cultural identity. But on the other hand, Greenland is also seeing new opportunities surfacing because of this change in environment. So they have tourism, for example, is blossoming. We saw a couple of touristic ships coming in with all their cameras. Mining and agriculture is surfacing. So it's an opportunity for Greenland to become more prosperous and more independent. But at the same time, this change in lifestyle is also bringing a really high toll on the local people. So you're taking them from being in small towns and putting them in these urbanized residential buildings. They're going from fishing to being contained in these office jobs, and that's really difficult for them. So Greenland has to juggle when it looks at its opportunities, but also the challenges that it's facing. And of course, together with all the historical and political aspects that come with it. And when we talk about sea level rise, actually, Greenland may not have that immediate problem. You see, the melting water, the warming water, will be displaced, and it will flood and affect millions of people in coastal areas elsewhere. So when we hear about Greenland and polar bears in the headlines, there's a lot more going on behind those words. It's like a huge, complex network of both local stories and a bigger picture. But this is not just limited to climate talk. Of course, I'm talking about climate because this is related to what I work on, but we can talk about something else. Vaccines. Are they going to make your child sick? And how about GMOs? What does genetically modified even mean? Where is biotechnology or AI taking us? The public deserves to have a direct source to that information, and that source should be us. Not only because as taxpayers, they're funding our research, but because keeping our science apolitical and objective does not mean that we're not also citizens of that society. And university walls do not make us immune to whatever decisions or actions our society takes. Now, some of my colleagues, well, I've heard from other scientists, fear or voice concerns that the people just don't care about what we do as scientists, that they find it boring, or that they just can't connect with us. Or that we should just stick to doing science and that's all. But people do care. Otherwise, they wouldn't be marching around the world for science. Clearly, they know it has an impact in their lives. And it is our job to communicate for 3 reasons. The first, because no one knows our research better than we do. Talking about our work is good for our fields, for our careers, and it's a service to that society. It reminds us of why we're doing science in the first place. We want to understand the world around us. We want to take human knowledge a little bit further. So why wouldn't we want to share that with the rest of the people? Of course, it also means that we have to work on being better communicators. But science is a team effort and a sort of team quality control. So we have to be good at talking to each other anyway. Now, at the beginning of my PhD, I was very excited, and I went to this conference, and I saw a senior scientist whom I admire very much. So I went up to him, and I asked him, what do you think is our responsibility as scientists in this whole climate talk? And he said, we should be doing the best possible science we can, so we can pass that on to policymakers. And then they'll take it on from there, and that's where our job ends. But I've always been a bit restless with that answer, because what happens when those policymakers or a certain government becomes disinterested, or even worse, finds it goes against their interest to follow environmental policies? Who do we as scientists turn to then? Do we only then turn to society and say, guys, yeah, we should talk? Society should be our main stakeholder. And for that reason, we need the second point, science literacy. Because science is everywhere. It's in how we produce our food. It's in making healthy, longer living humans. It's taking us to space. But only a very few percentage of us can actually talk and read science. And even that is clouded with scientific jargon, or it's locked behind paywalls of scientific journals. In a democracy, we all have the right to choose. But how can we choose? Or propose solutions, or innovate, Well, we're not completely aware of the state of our society, its needs, or where it's going. Science and technology are everywhere. So we have to help give the tools to our society for them to also be participants. Because if they choose to be only consumers and not active participants of it, it should be a choice, not an imposed disadvantage. The third point, critical thinking. As scientists, we're trained to make observations, to test our hypotheses, and to adjust our knowledge based on that result. We are pushed to ask questions and be skeptical, but also to receive criticism. And we're willing and open to modify what we presently know. That's the way that science can move forward. So what if we as a society could listen to politicians or read headlines in the same way? Society at large is the ultimate decision maker. And as scientists, we can contribute by providing the tools and the information they need to make the best decisions. Which is why I'm standing here, and I'm calling on my fellow scientists to rethink our role in society. We can be promoters of discussion. We do this every day already. We do this over lunch. So let's take those discussions outside the academic setting and into the rest of society. Science communication should be an integral part of our curriculum. It should be part of a researcher's training. Carl Sagan said, "Not explaining science seems to me perverse. When you're in love, you want to tell the world." And we love our jobs. I haven't met a scientist who just accidentally became a scientist. We love what we do. So let's let it out. You can use your hobbies to make your research more accessible. If you don't want to write, try photography. Take us into that scientific journey through photographs. Tweet, sing. I danced the topic of my PhD in a video. And actually, I learned a lot more about the basics of my topic only after I did that. So it really helps to see it from different angles. Engage with your community with citizen science. Meet up with artists. And if the general public is just not you, you don't do big audiences, that's okay too. Then take it to your family. Be that cool aunt or uncle that can answer the kids' questions of why is the sky blue? We can promote roundtable discussions where we have scientists, natural and social, where we have students and teachers and fishermen all gathered in the same table and talking. And that way, we can promote a society that will listen, that will question, and that will dialogue. And that way, collectively, we can steer towards a positive future with a society that is both empowered and is inclusive. Thank you very much.